Why did I become enamored by all of this? I've been led to a lifetime of awe because I've seen things. Things made by human hands that I cannot believe. They aren't real, so we just call it art. And yet, somewhere along the way, I think people forgot the point of these things. This stuff called art wasn't just created by us, it created us. It told our own stories better than we ever could. Where would you be without the music that's orchestrated your life, or those characters that you saw as your own recognised ideal? A woman watches her family return home in the snow. A madman preaches salvation on a hillside. The Prince of Denmark holds the skull of his childhood jester. And there's the Garden of Earthly Delights. Sometimes I forget what all of these things mean to me until I see them again. They're like my old friends that understood me better than anyone else could. I look upon these works of art and feel joy that I managed to exist with them. I feel envy that I wasn't great enough to create them. And I feel content because these things were just made by human hands. There is no great secret within them, and yet they break beyond our material world into the eternal and take us with them. Because what's a life without the abstraction of narrative to give it its true meaning? For as often as we're caught up in the minutiae of our daily lives, we can't forget that we're not alone. We're with Tarkovsky, with Beethoven, Van Gogh, Tolstoy, Shakespeare. It's the Psalms, it's the light, it's the words, it's your being and all its love and pain. It's the friends that forgot you. It's your life that you love dearly, now behind you. It's everything that you care for, your films, your music, your story. These are not playthings. They speak of and believe in a beauty. And there will be those determined to tell you that they don't really exist, even though they follow us out of the galleries, out of the cinemas, out of the pages, and never leave us, like an old companion. Why do we try to negate and avoid this beauty that's right in front of us, that's willing to offer so much? Why is it that as time passes on, we find ourselves drifting further from this universal truth, as though it's not a part of us anymore, as though it was made for a different time, for a different people? But who could claim to have more impact on our world than a Mona Lisa, than an Aragon, than an Achilles? And with this pantheon towering above us, we will still ask, what's the role of art? What purpose does it have? Asking if it even has a place in the modern world, as though it's something disposable. If nothing else, I want you to remember that when you look at the greatest pieces of art in the world, you are somewhere in there. Because the story of art is your story. It's the story of all of us. And I do believe whatever abyss this time that we find ourselves claims to be, art will save us all. If I asked you, is art important? What would you say? And then if I were to ask why, how would you answer? We all have some opinion on art, some of them quite strong. But if we were required to back up our opinion, it would mean we would have to some degree, define what art is. And I think in requiring this of the average person, there'd be a bit of uncertainty in the answer. I think the answer would probably be along the lines of, art is important, but not all of it. And I actually don't think this is necessarily a bad answer. It's decently accurate, actually. I think deep down, people think that art is great. Like those old paintings, those are great. But why? To verbalize, why is Leonardo da Vinci great? Why is an old portrait culturally valuable? What's the answer? Why does it matter? Why is art important? "10,000 years ago, before the thought of civilization even entered our brains, humans were carving tools that were non-utilitarian. We were making things that had no use, because we needed to, because something was telling us to, something from within. I think art has a capacity, beyond anything else, at defining our species as something greater than we can possibly envisage. It manifests our instinct over our intellect, puts our collective unconscious on display, and the ways that all of us traverse through life and death together. This fleeting moment is all we have, and yet within it lies the connection to every one of our ancestors, the passion that we feel for human achievement that results in some kind of a legacy. It's the unfolding of history in front of our eyes, and all the history that's been forgotten. And if I were to define art, I would define it as the abstraction of the human soul. Now, whether you are religious or not, it is the soul, the totality of the human condition that's present in all of art. It's all of our joy, all of our sadness, but it's so much more. Why would a gaze from a non-existent person touch us? Why would a fantasy story make us feel some sense of catharsis? Why would these unreal things impact our very real life? Because our internal is complex, and explanation isn't enough. The sensorial experience offered by art evokes a new type of understanding outside of the theoretical. We see images we don't even consciously understand, a painting that speaks to us, the preservation of a culture in some esoteric language, and yet they all make us feel something. Why should music, just a collection of sounds, mean so much to us? Because it's all abstract, and it's in abstractions where truth becomes wisdom, knowledge expressed as proverb, information through intuition, and yet it's the same powerful perspective that people would use to diminish the importance of art.
Here it is then, the gentleman's bid, ladies and gentlemen, at 170 million for the Warhol, is selling here.
Most of the dismissal of art as secondary comes with the idea that it's not a science, that it's not objective truth, and so there are things more important than it. But this shouldn't be a decision between either or. The idea that we have to choose between looking at things through a scientific lens or an artistic lens is the perspective of someone that aims to reduce the human being. In antiquity, we treated the highest of society as philosophers. And what was philosophy if not an umbrella term? Thales, Pythagoras, Plato, Aristotle. They studied mathematics, astronomy, literary criticism, aesthetics, metaphysics, poetry, all of which we placed under the study of philosophy. And generations later unfurled the idea of the Renaissance man, the revival of Studia Humanitatis. The Renaissance integrated all the studies of history, art, mathematics, science, rhetoric, moral philosophies. The aim was to develop a complete human being. Returning to Da Vinci, we see a man who's an engineer, an inventor, an artist, all of which were inseparable to one another. The study of music could inform mathematics. The study of art could train observation for science. This multitude was part of the pursuit of the ancient ideal of a harmony between all aspects of life that the human being encounters. In his book of the Five Rings, Miyamoto Musashi reinforces this ideal that true mastery must come from breadth as well as depth. Fundamental in developing the art of swordsmanship in Japan, Musashi emphasized mastery as the universal art, that in order to truly master swordsmanship, one must master calligraphy, tea-making, sculpture, strategy, leadership. The idea is that specified focus leads to a narrowing in one's perspective, and alternatively, by synthesizing all of our domains rather than isolating them, our perspective of the world is more complete. This ultimately is the true way for all of us, And this horrific discourse of complete materialism or complete spiritualism is a product of a world that separated itself from its highest achievements. To explain who and what we are can be reduced to the idea that we're nothing more than a collection of atoms, which we are. Nobody should dismiss science, just as nobody should dismiss the pantheon of art. Some of the greatest writings in the history of our species have dealt with this line of the boundary between materialism and the spiritual. The character of the judge in Blood Meridian displays the immense power of a man who's completely channeled both worlds, one of complete matter of fact, where life is life and death is death, and there is no in between, to the other world of a completely connected history where every action we perform is a symbol on a giant interconnected tapestry that ties the cosmos together. Dostoevsky speaks of spiritual transcendence in The Brothers Karamazov. Camus talks about transcending suffering through the myth of Sisyphus. And yes, we can explain scientifically why we feel what we do, but is that sufficient in understanding the nature of humanity? We're not asking whether it's correct, it is. But if you've read any of these works, you simply know that that's not enough. It's not all-encompassing of the human being. And we cannot exist in a world where one is fighting against the other. You may know about religion, but what do you know about biology, about the elegance of the cosmos, about our elemental truths? And as such, you may know about these, but then what do you know about archetypes, about theology, about the importance of aesthetics, about the symbolic narrative of our existence? If we keep separating the two, then we'll end in a position of two incredibly intelligent camps that become incapable of viewing their alternative, of having a two-eyed vision, unable to synthesize their perspective with the other.
Do you believe Cain existed?
I think the pattern that Cain represents is an eternal pattern. And so
yes,
it's a higher
different.
level of existence.
That's different. I realize that.
Well, there are Cain types who exist, and there
Yeah,
could well
yeah.
be
There are Cain types.
Yeah.
But Cain himself, which yes, it's something that's there. But I care about facts.
But the reality is, I don't think I need to convince anyone that science is important. If you don't think that, there are better people out there to convince you otherwise. This one is about art, about the humanities, which sadly in our current era do require an argument for their sake. They are important.
Intelligent young woman who said, yeah, I wanted to go to art school actually because I really love doing art, but my teacher said I was too bright for that, so I should go for science subjects. And I thought, this is really the death of a culture when you take the brightest young people and stop them thinking about a huge area of human activity.
Go and play your most beautiful piece of music and explain to yourself the reason that you love it is nothing more than your synapses firing in the right direction. And then in that rationality, understanding that you can bypass those emotions which inhibit you from becoming a more efficient person. After all, this is the era in which we're reaching the limits of materialistic perfectionism. Our beauty standards are measured to the millimeter. Our technologies are becoming faster and circumventing all of those internal barriers which get in our way. But we're not solely creatures of efficiency. We're complex and we come with a narrative. You want to talk about efficiency? Go and tell everyone around you that you want to create a fantasy world of made-up creatures, a world that doesn't exist where everything within it is completely fictional. It has magic and monsters. People would look at you like you're crazy. Why would you waste your time with that? And now not only that, but that story you're going to make into a book, and you're going to write that book over the course of 17 years. One book, 17 years. That's what Tolkien did when he wrote The Lord of the Rings. The Mona Lisa itself, from inception to completion, also took around 17 years. Now, can you imagine convincing someone that you needed 17 years to complete one painting? But why not? How long is something like this supposed to take? Is there a correct barometer between creativity and a time frame? 2001: A Space Odyssey was a single film that took around 4 years to complete. La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona began construction in 1882 and is still not finished. Why spend so much time creating something in reverence of something that literally doesn't exist? Why use so much of your life on that that's fake, that isn't objectively, materially true? The simplest answer is that there is a world with art and a world without art. And I know now that, thinking upon it, that there's nothing more profound, more beautiful, more transcendental, more inspiring, more devoted to the love of life than our greatest pieces of art. That is why they're important, because they simply are. And I can say that even if every single person on the planet comes to the conclusion that art has no actual purpose to progress our species, that scientifically we can create a world without it, where all our needs are met, all our anxieties are tranquilized, and we are closer to an objective truth, I would still pick the world with art. Art has been a vessel to communicate our greatest attributes, and it puts us in constant comparison with those attributes. When you see Michelangelo's David, not only does the piece represent all of the human virtues, heroism, stoicism, even righteous anger, there's also a discussion that goes on with its creator. A man who was so incredible, capable enough to take raw material and through his dexterity make something almost unbelievable. And this simple image of a man is what says all of this. Everything on display in a single piece exalts the human being in its entirety. And the moment we witness this, we place ourselves within that narrative. In this single piece, we can be David or Michelangelo. It speaks towards a dignity, and that there's always something lying beyond our immediate existence. It instills within us the endless motivation to express the truest version of ourselves as an ode to humanity, to do something or make something which is universal and eternal. Because without it, all we have is the immediate world with nothing above us to strive towards. And so, in a nutshell, when we say the word art, this is what we talk about. And if you can justify or reason that this isn't as important as a thing can be, then I'd like to hear it. Because this immense, overwhelming construct of human law seems to bypass people. We can't define art because to them, these are only examples of art, but they're not art, as if these are the outliers. To think about art isn't to think about a Van Eyck, it's to discuss painting in general. It's like the layman making a clay pot. How often do we hear that everything is art, that a lamp can be art? Well, of course it can, but not because the lamp falls into the category of anything can be art, but that the lamp could be made with mastery and passion, that it transcends beyond its very materialism. The argument that anything can be art is supposed to be because everything has the potential to become everlasting, not because art is to be diminished to the lowest common denominator. This dismantling of what art is has completely inverted our expectations of it, and it's resulted in people thinking about art to be something of the lowest effort. It's sad because art discourse has devolved into such levels of illiteracy that it's more accurately defined now as media commentary. The problem is that it often devolves into an infinite chamber of examination and scrutiny over all of the things occurring in the absolute immediate with no grasp of past or present. It's an economy of discourse created and perpetuated by the least qualified to discuss such matters.
These are like my top 3 classic, amazing, best movies. I think that these are good litmus tests for humans too, in that like if anybody has a major issue with any of these 3 movies, I think that they're dead inside. Number 1, okay, Pirates of the Caribbean, the first one.
How can you understand the culture without understanding art, without reading the classics, without being able to name a couple of paintings? The inevitable result is a hyperfixation on the superficial and a gradual drift away from any human endeavour that could be considered transcendent.
If you trace a line from David's face, down his arm, through the sword, and toward Goliath's head, you get a diagonal that cuts across the entire canvas. Remember that you can find this artwork, and many more, in our catalogue. You'll find faithful reproductions, ready to hang. We also offer phone cases, so you can protect your device while carrying a piece of art with you wherever you go.
People want their opinions to have equivalence, and the result is that when you have the ability to speak, all manner of discourse becomes a matter of subjective opinion, and then there is no truth. That some guy interviewing a social media personality on YouTube is also now a documentary. Like, have you not seen Showa? Do you know what a documentary is? And thus comes that wonderful conclusion that anything can be art, and art is subjective. We in turn come to the natural consequences of this illiteracy that are disseminated like their gospel truth.
You didn't have to be able to paint the Haywain by Constable to be an artist. That it was punk and it was DIY. And those things that I was passing, thinking, I can do that. Then the thought became, well, why shouldn't I?
Representation becomes a critical pillar of art, a notion most espoused by those who've never encountered a truly great piece of art that actually represents a new manner of living. One way or another, Tukibuki, Yellow Earth, go watch stuff like this to inform your opinion first, because those that are going to espouse this stuff, they are inept at how to represent anything. These are the things that are accepted daily and become expected, and this is what art turns into.
Which is giving me serious Uncanny Valley vibes. And while we're on the topic of icks, can I just say that this hand is making me feel really weird?
And yet, there is an antidote to this. Just as those films I mentioned can inform your opinions, interaction with great art allows people to critically think, because it speaks to us in abstractions. And so you must make logical connections that do not presently exist in our world. This is how that metaphysical thought first emerged as a bedrock of philosophy. And this is what art is supposed to serve. The abstraction that creates the narrative that breaks out of our worldly endeavours and connects us to something so meaningful. We live in a period of humanity almost defined by a complete malaise. And is it not precisely because of the present orientation, our complete obsession with our worldly things, with our personal dramas? Art may not be physically capable to alter your immediate landscape, but then why is it that a single piece of music can alter you from a position of complete hopelessness into something triumphant? A single poem changes the trajectory of our life. This stuff has a spectacular effect on us. We aren't simply invested in characters, we're invested because within all characters lie a fraction of us. Art reflects our realities, but it serves a greater story, greater than any of us can tell. Aristotle said, art is not just a way to represent the outward appearance of things, but their inward significance. Its very purpose is to delve beyond that which is superficial. And then we question why this stuff lasts forever, and have the balls to say something as ludicrous as art isn't that important. What the fuck are you talking about? Do you know what art is? Probably every single thing that you interact with in your life that gives you joy is some attempt at being an aesthetic achievement. And guess what? All the stuff you hate is all the stuff that doesn't attempt that. Politics, taxes, sales jobs, HR, team building exercises. We need art, and we need it to be great. Because without it, we're lost. Art is important, because without it, this is all we will be left with. I find that one of the difficulties people have with defining art is that art is this all-encompassing thing of a culture and a time and a place. And so to define art, you also have to give a definition to where we are now. We're currently a quarter of the way through the 21st century. A lot of us will remember a time before that, and most of us will not reach to see the end of it. So this is all we have. Out of all the times in history you could have been born, you got this one. So you better get a good understanding of what that means. The modern world and its aesthetics are what define our era, but this is no different to any era that preceded us and everyone that will follow. The world changes over time, of course, but these changes don't happen in a vacuum. Every era, even just throughout the 20th century, can be identified by its imagery. The look of a culture or a society is a combination of multiple moving parts. Sometimes they're in opposition, sometimes they're in tandem, and that interplay produces imagery that surrounds you. Art, design, philosophy, politics, technology, these are all intertwined to some degree, and the complete coalescence of them creates an aesthetic. Sometimes it can be multiple aesthetics. We might think of those as subcultures, and they can only emerge in certain milieus with numerous facets, often as reactive. Aesthetics are either as rebellion or assimilation, and art is a key element of this. Art, that thing which apparently no one can define. Not long ago, we knew what art was. It was a painting, a creation, something monolithic that illuminated an entire culture. And it doesn't matter when and where it emerged. Ancient Mesopotamia, the indigenous Americas, medieval Europe, sub-Saharan Africa, Far East dynasties, Amazonian tribes, art has been integral to the peoples of every culture, past, present, and hopefully, future. We made things as capsules to indicate greatness and power, to externalize the great internal. But unless they were items of religious reverence, most people didn't get to see art. And as is so often mentioned in some bizarre attempt to refute its importance, art was primarily commissioned by the elite for private collections. But around the 1700s, public museums emerged, and artworks could be viewed more than ever before. And then the narrative of art became something tangible. This is how the story goes up to the 20th century. Art was bound within gold frames and bore the face of reverent beauty for millennia. And then the 20th century shattered this image. Modernity comes. The foundation of art is overturned. It starts with a scream. Modern anxiety becomes emblemized in a single gesture, and this new extreme perspective bulldozes through Monet's countryside idealism. The world was cracked open by a freight train, and through those cracks poured infinite new ways of seeing. God is dead, now art is free. We see in hypercolour for the first time. Matisse comes and explodes the canvas with wild hues not present in nature. We abandon the realistic for a more intense version of Impressionism. It's called Fauvism. A warping rather than a representation is now the name of the game for art. Picasso fractures bodies into geometry. Braque, inspired by cinema, brings multiple perspectives at once, like a camera shooting from different angles to offer a true totality of image. Now an individual's perspective was too limited, and thus Cubism became the necessity and nothing looked real anymore. We look to the future and decide non-traditional representation is what makes the ideal man. We embrace change, we're dynamic. We make Art Deco buildings, the English make Vorticism, the Soviets make constructivism. We weren't being shown the world, we were being shown what it feels like to live in it. So what could come after all of this? We move from the Sistine Chapel to a woman with two eyes on the side of her head. It's like a joke really, isn't it? Art is like a joke. Why not make anything art? Fuck it, a urinal, a joke. The question that emerges from Duchamp is no longer, is this art worthy? It's now, is this art? A question that the 20th century never stopped asking, and maybe it never will. Then war, then another. the world is reduced to ash. The fear made German expressionism. Then from its darkness comes more shadow. Cinema is infused with the realities of the human condition as both noir and Italian neorealism survey the remaining landscape to find stories of humans. Except these are the new kinds of humans. The ones who survived and the ones who were changed. Otto Dix paints the trenches. Frida Kahlo casts her own pain onto the canvas. A changing of the guard. The crown of art moves from Paris to New York. The artist's interior becomes the most important canvas. Pollock dances and explodes all over it. Rothko treats colour like fields of emotion. These aren't pictures, they aren't even representations, they're experiential. Again, what is this art? It's the immediate, it's now, it's what's within, and it doesn't matter if it's true. Then the aggression subsides, and it's all pop again. Soup cans, comic book cries, advertisement, cultural commentary fuses with mainstream acceptance. Art was no longer antithetical to the mainstream, its success was dictated by its absorption into it. The surface became everything. The icon paintings became icons of the time. Masks, a new kind of worship. Cinema discovers the auteur and makes itself a mishmash of influence, chopping and cutting itself up like a Richard Hamilton work. Minimalism then responds to this and seeks to strip away everything and start from scratch. A white canvas, a single line. We might think of the 1960s as the first real breaking from tradition in pop culture, and in many ways, breaking from tradition altogether. From here, the rapidity of art movements increases. We have the psychedelic movement on top of pop and minimalism. The Beatles' album covers show the shift in the tide in each changing aesthetic. Germany, Richter blurred photographs until they look like memories. Japan, the Gutai group punched and burnt their canvases. United States, Basquiat scrawled a new language onto alley walls. By the 90s, grunge aesthetic reflected a post-punk world. A new independent cinema held by Quentin Tarantino was present. Chuck Palahniuk, David Foster Wallace, and a heap of other artists make their names known as faces of a new kind of rebellion. And then the internet came and said welcome to the 21st century. Regardless of what we think of this chronology, it's still a chronology. There's a trajectory that art faces that builds on top of what came before, what it's in response to, and so on. There will always be some defining aspects to the time in which we live. So, where are we currently? Do we live amongst the contemporary, postmodern, hypermodern? Why has it become so hard to define when we are? If we examine periods of any culture and measure them against the contemporary, then you may get the distinct feeling as though we are suffering from diminishing returns, as though the evolution of aesthetics between eras has become less and less radical and deviate less and less to that which preceded it. If anything, rather than a complete shift, it's as though our aesthetics are simply refining to the common denominator, sacrificing the distinct for the homogeneous. Those subcultures that emerged organically have become so few and far between in our aesthetic landscape, as though the differences between the alternative and normalcy have been flattened. The works that the mainstream and the alternative engage with are almost identical. Their signifiers are interchangeable. There's an overwhelming sameness across all aesthetics from all cultures. But what could have led to this? Well, if you were to think on it, it wouldn't take long to come up with an answer. Something must have emerged which homogenized our culture and diluted it. In order to have done that, it must have made counterculture almost non-existent. Well, how could something erase counterculture? It would have to create a society wherein it became more difficult for alternative lifestyles to emerge, and it would only succeed in that if it were a successful replacement of counterculture. If something emerged within the past 25 years that was a brand new type of culture that we all engaged with, that was ever present and all-consuming, does that sound familiar at all? If we had to find the most defining aspect of the aesthetic and culture of now, we would say that it's technologically based. But what does that even mean? Well, it's not that technology plays a large role in the development of our aesthetic, it's that the kind of technologies that are fueling our aesthetic are exactly the kind of technologies that would homogenize a culture and remove any and all distinctions between us. Something that would remove our ability to curate. In the past few years, we've lost that defining aspect of what our present era represents because cultural impact cannot occur beyond the boundaries of these hyper-technologies. And just like pop art was the moment when art shook hands with the mainstream, the internet age became the event horizon for all culture and life to be curated by online means.
Now that I've gotten on the internet, I'd rather be on my computer than doing just about anything.
It's really cool.
There is a look of now, a dulling, a collapse of aesthetic standards. Theatres full of films whose sole creative decision is Instagram-friendly cinematography. Music genres parade with the iconography of a real counterculture they don't understand. Nationalities become trends, so musicians aim to ingratiate themselves into an Americanized aesthetic, speaking in languages they don't understand to the point that people are listening to gibberish.
I watched all the videos of you while I was the next. There are no more episodes, crate them in my heart. It goes deceiving matter. How do I get you?
You're part of a world flattened into a singular aesthetic. The irony is that in the internet making available all alternative forms of lifestyle accessible to us, it immediately brought them into the mainstream framework of online culture. That cultural collapse is a genuine fear that people feel, that culture is a hair away from dying. Algorithmic music is overtaking, the cinema is being replaced by content, art is dead. Although, the cinema also died in the 80s when the VHS came out. And before that it died in the 50s, at the rise of television. We're constantly preparing for the funeral of art, and yet it never comes. Because although we are perhaps a hair away from our culture dying, we're also a hair away from it being completely rejuvenated, as we always are. I could give example after example of our entropic culture, but I'm more interested in diagnosing this and finding a solution. Design is tied to a place and time. Japanese woodblock prints weren't just stylistic, they carried an entire worldview. Bauhaus wasn't just a look, it was a philosophy. Even kitsch and mass-produced pop art had distinct identities. Because what is the highest form of human feeling? Passion. Passion for that you love and loathe. Passion to make you feel something, anything. And the legitimate fear hovering over us is that the world we're creating will result in people no longer able to feel anything of value. And yet, in spite of this juggernaut of soul-sucking malaise, greatness still emerges. Yes, we are drowning in the noise, but it's not a noise that eradicates our culture, it's just the noise. It's just trying to distract you from those that don't partake in it. Robert Eggers, Father John Misty, Sebastian Salvo. These are just some of the incredible artists that shine in spite of the abundance of disposability within our culture. There is legitimate concern for the devolution of many aspects of our cultural landscape, and I don't want people to think that everything's fine, but I also don't want the opposite. When works like Tar, Judas and the Black Messiah, The Zone of Interest, Anatomy of a Fall, Killers of the Flower Moon, Nickel Boys are all films being made just in the past couple of years, then clearly there's always going to be space for great art. Because great art is made whether there's space for it or not. You make great things, you don't ask permission for it. What I'm trying to get across is that the 21st century is not different to any other place in time. It's not the end of everything, just like it isn't the beginning. Just because our technologies have connected us to brand new methods of information and lifestyles we were unaware of prior, doesn't mean that we've become an isolated point separated from the rest of history. We're part of an ongoing story. So what is it that we can get from the 21st century? Well, if the Renaissance was the rebirth of form, and modernism was the rebellion against it, then I believe we have the opportunity for the 21st century to be something truly miraculous. If we were discussing the idea of synthesizing both the breadth and depth of mastery, we are fortunate enough to have been born in a time where we can usher in that new mode of being for mankind. And the mode is simple. We curate what we know. We have the world of our masters to look back upon and learn from. Learn from their work ethic, their ability to ascend their dexterity to heights we couldn't even envision, become the absolute formalist. And then we have the work of ultimate transgression, incredible postmodernism that defined brand new modes of narrative exploration across every medium. Must we live in a world where there's no synthesis of the two? Must the Alan Moores and Michael Hanekes of the world be more than just footnotes?
Our approach to culture has, in the mainstream, has degenerated. The values that people used to put into a work of art, those have been eroded.
The times in which we live are made up of countless people that grew up in a world comparatively devoid of technology and simultaneously overwhelmed by it. We experienced an analog style and a digital one. Cinephiles that grew up on a diet of the internet, master painters as pop culture fanatics surrounded by video games. Mesopotamia developed as the intersection between the East and the West, perfectly placed as the hybrid to birth a bedrock of civilization. If we play our cards right, we can discover culturally that we exist in the exact same melting pot, surrounded by an array of incredible influences, primed at the exact time and place to birth something incredible, a new renaissance. The 21st century feels as though it's lain dormant for far too long. However, you would have to simply ignore the range of possibility that lies in our immediate grasp. Many of the people of the 21st century have experienced worlds so disparate from one another. It's time to take the best of them and merge them into a real movement for all of mankind to look back upon our era as a zenith of culture. But the reality is that for any of this to occur, there must be some pushback. There must be a foundation that we build upon and that which we resist. We still must strive for greatness, as complacency and tolerance for mediocrity will no longer cut it. And to create at all in the 21st century is an act of rebellion. To sit down and actually read a novel instead of seeing what some guy has to say about some internet drama. To make something, anything useless and beautiful that throws a spanner into that fucking big machine that we're all tired of. And then we see that it's not that big. It can be broken and dismantled with a single decision. We are at the same place every artist has been, every civilization has been, staring over the precipice of a complete abyss that we can't turn back from. But there is hope, and it lies within art. We can create. We so often separate ourselves from animals, as though we're not animals, like we're separate from nature. But we aren't. We are nature. And you know how we get amazed when animals are born and know exactly what to do? Well, that's us. We are born to create. It's something that we told ourselves that showed we were made in the image of God, that only a divine being knows how to create. And it's in that act of creation that we do find some deep meaning outside of our immediate existence. And if there is hope for this century, then it's right in front of us to make our own, to forge the path we want. And the fight for the soul of mankind will not come from politics, industry, or technology. It'll come from the undefinable and useless thing called art. In an attempt to make art, one must simply do it. It's not easy, it's not hard. Art is simply one way, and it's not another. The process of making anything isn't luxurious, it's exactly that, a process. And we have this idea that the moments of clarity and discovery of genius are some profound revelations that emerge from nowhere. That's just not true. I've had countless projects that I was too cautious to finish. Things that were made that I've never done anything with. Constantly fearing that they need to come at the right time. Perfecting things that I've maybe overthought. And sometimes I feel bad about this, but that's also part of the process. There's no perfect art, just like there's no perfect life. But the journey, the making, the moving forward on a path with no destination is its greatness. Many artists will brand themselves as geniuses, talk about their process as though it's so beyond the realm of a normal thinking brain, but it's not. That's just marketing. That's just an insecurity from someone scared that they might not be as relevant as they want to be. The making of art is the same as the making of anything. You just do it. And you come to realize that what you make is more important than you. Exposure to great art and exposure to that within yourself will feed one another, and you'll be found in that endless cycle of discovery. There was a time when I watched Taxi Driver every night at midnight. Sat in the twilight of my bedroom, I didn't know loneliness until it was given a face. Reddened eyes scattered around the urban decay made me feel a bit more whole. And then I remembered, they were the same eyes in Cries and Whispers, the eyes of a person longing for true happiness, only to find it in a moment of childhood communion. These were my eyes, they were your eyes. I was 10 years old when I watched Goodfellas with my dad on TV. It's not the most glamorous of stories, and I didn't know that I was witnessing a form of beauty then. But that was the moment I became enthralled by cinema. I didn't know it consciously, but I was being exposed to a new kind of beauty that even my childhood mind could grasp onto. I saw how Henry was telling me his story, how the film was becoming more frenetic as things grew more intense. This was the first time that I realized that a film could actually talk to you. If I hadn't watched that, perhaps I may not have realized how art speaks to you in all its forms. And then on it went, through my whole life. A notebook from my teenage years analysing the downward spiral. One day in school we had to perform a scene from a film. People picked their favourites. My friends and I did a word-for-word reenactment of the opening scene of Pulp Fiction. I was 14, I played Jules. I don't think we'd be allowed to do that today. But in my engagement with art, I discovered the utter joy of discovery. And it was just a childlike excitement of finding amazing things. And I still feel it. You would listen to music that no one else knew about. You did things because they were actually cool, even if nobody thought otherwise. And your passion was your obsession. And so you want to tell the whole world about your passion. You do the opposite of gatekeeping because you want the whole world to feel the way that you felt about that book you read or that song you heard. I'd show up with my friends, and before you know it, we're all quoting our favourite films together every day. And every day it's a brand new thing you learn about. You learn about 2001: A Space Odyssey and try to figure out what it all means. Kubrick becomes this insane master that you discover. And then you read A Clockwork Orange and you learn about Frank Miller's Batman and Basquiat. Simply by being alongside this stuff, I found new wells of knowledge that made me feel as though I was a different person than before I knew it. And this is the joy of discovery. That passion and obsession and mastery led to something always being right around the corner. And nowhere are these attributes more spectacular than in the world of art, martial arts, the culinary arts, any art that requires the human spirit to excel. Your life becomes orchestrated to that music that you hold dear because it's more than that. I was supposed to get a job in an office first and then find a way to make art on the side, but I didn't want to. Art had to be in some way my job first and foremost, and if you feel the same way as I do, then it should be yours too. This is what you prioritize, and you make this work however you can. You make films where you're the actor, director, editor, and camera operator. That's how I started, and if that's the only way it can be, then so be it. There's too much fatalism in the world now, especially when the recipe for our cure is within our own hands. I know that immediately following this, there will be those that want to decry the idea of creating great art because art will not help people who struggle in a political regime where they can't pay their bills. Okay, but then what? What is this life that we have? What's the alternative? I don't want to live in a world devoid of hope where creation goes unnoticed. What if? What if? What if there's a heat death of the universe and nothing will last? So should I stop? And fuck it. If all that matters is how I live my material life, then why not be a corporate type so I can rise up the ladder by any means necessary and pay my shit bills for a life that stripped away all of my humanity? Art and creation can serve as the antidote to all of this because we are constantly in comparison with our best attributes, not our worst. That we can transcend our suffering, that we become beings whose capacity outweighs the materiality of the universe. Art has shaped all of our lives, and as repayment to it, we should aim to replicate ourselves in its image, not focus on our most superficial aspects. All the time, people are telling us that to be an artist, you either sell out or you die. No, this isn't true. Take it from me. I will never sell out. I will find a way to put out into the world something, anything of value, and find people like the people that have made it this far in this video that will replicate that. Because life is more than this. This is the 21st century, and you've been told to grind and buy this and become popular and get relevant. Listen, that's not what life is about. It's not about the fucking internet. It's not about your relatability. It's not about the worldly things you own. It's not about fucking thumbnails, and it's not about senior management at a sales company. It's about the life you live. It's about the soul you have, the people you love, the things that mean something, and they're all around us. There will always be room for us to create something powerful, and if everything I said falls on deaf ears, then there'll always be space for you to create something powerful. And then the message of humanity that you imbued within that work will remain for all eternity, and the next generation will have their opportunity to bring humanity back to its apex. We will always keep on searching for greatness and sending the same message.